Well, welcome to our coffee chat for December. We have Elizabeth Strom with us, and she's the vice president of Murray Wise Associates LLC. Elizabeth is a farm manager with experience, and she has strengths and experience with that for her team. And she's responsible for farm management, business development. She's committed to caring for her clients and their farmland. Prior to joining Murray Wise Associates, she served as the professional farm manager and real estate broker for Hertz Farm Management, Inc., where she managed nearly 19,000 acres across the state of Illinois. She has collaborated with farmers and landowners to meet the owner's goals and financial objectives. Elizabeth also bought and sold farmland across the Midwest for her clients. She's a busy girl. Elizabeth is an accredited farm manager. Elizabeth serves on local boards for American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. She is the president of the Illinois Society of Professional Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. She is on the board of directors for Illinois Realtors Land Institute. She is a licensed real estate broker in Illinois and an auctioneer and a licensed drone pilot. She grew up on a corn, soybean, and cattle farm in Toulon, Illinois, and she received her associates from Blackhawk Community College. And then she went on to get her BS in agriculture business and agronomy from Illinois State University. I'm sorry, Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa. So welcome, Elizabeth. She's got her screen shared with us here, and we'll let you go ahead and share your message for today with us. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Deb. Appreciate all of you taking the time to jump on this morning. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the basics of farm management and to get a little bit into farmland values this morning. So actually, apologize there. So this is a little bit of my background. Looks like Deb covered the majority of that. So I'm going to talk a little about what is farm management. So farm management is essentially where we work as professional farm managers and we manage and act as a fiduciary for a farmland client. So it might be an absentee landowner that owns farmland, doesn't live here, and needs someone to oversee and take care of the land on their behalf. So we work with leasing farms and we work with farmers when we're doing that. An accredited farm manager, you may have seen, she'd mentioned that I'm an accredited farm manager. And you may see the AFM behind people's names. That means that they've been through a process and some classes to make sure they understand how to do financial analysis and make sure they understand all the things you need to know in order to serve the public appropriately. So that's kind of what a farm manager is when you see that and what an AFM is. So something we always talk with our clients about is goal setting. And we think that's very important, not only in our goal or our role as a farm manager, but also for every farming family is where do you want to be in the next 5 to 10, 15 years? Many times farmland is actually owned by more than one person together. And so you have to make sure that all owners want the same thing. And as we're serving as a farm manager, we try to make sure we sit down with our clients and make sure that they are aligned in their goals and what they're looking for. So we're not all running in a different direction because no one's goal is going to be met if we're all running in different directions. So some goals that we see that landowners are interested in are, we have clients that the farm income is the only income that they have and they live off that income. So income is very important to them. We have others that are very interested in sustainability and want to look into conservation reserve programs or maybe cover crops or things like that. And then we also have clients, that are interested in participating where they want to own a portion of the crop. So we look at everyone's individual goals and then we try to come together with a plan in order to, maybe reach a little bit of each one of their goals on the farm. So there's a few different lease types that are available. We review these with all of our farmland clients to make sure that they're on the lease type that meets or that will most appropriately meet their goals. The first is a simple cash rent lease. This is where the farmer pays the landowner a rent. The landowner does not own any portion of the crop or buy any of the inputs. They just simply receive rent. A cash rent plus a bonus. This is a different kind, or it's more of a modification of a cash rent lease. So what this is where there's a base rent which is less than what you would see in a typical flat cash rent lease. And then there's a bonus clause. And what this bonus clause does is if there's some upside, so say that there is $7 corn again, and really, really good yields, the landowner will then be able to participate in some of the upside if there is some in that given year. We see these becoming more common as prices are becoming more volatile. A share lease. So a share lease is just as it sounds. The owner pays for a portion of the inputs, receives a portion of the crop. Same with the farmer. The traditional one is the 50-50 cash rent, or excuse me, the 50-50 share lease. We do see other modifications such as 60-40, or even 75-25. This is a higher risk lease than what we see in, like, say, a cash rent, where the income's pretty stable and you essentially know what your income's going to be when you negotiate that lease. The other one is the custom farming lease. So this is where the owner essentially hires the farmer as what I kind of call an independent contractor. So this is the highest risk lease because the owner is taking on all of the risk with potential weather, yield, crop prices. They own all of the crop, pay for all the inputs, but they also may receive the highest reward. So it's highest risk, highest reward. So questions we encourage people to think about when they're trying to select a lease is how much risk can I really take on financially? If you're a person that's living off the income, they need to consider that when they're selecting a lease. Also, are you willing to take on some of that risk to get more reward? Some people are in a financial position where they can do that. And then if you don't have a farm manager, are you comfortable marketing a crop? Just some items that we like to talk with landowners about for their leases. Obviously, if we're managing a farm, we're taking care of all of this. But if it's just a general landowner, we do like to educate them. If they're not interested in farm management, we always say you need to make sure that you have a written lease. This is not only good for the landowner, but it's also good for the farmer. We know that handshake agreements have been had for many, many years, and it's kind of they always say, it's well, that we have a trusting relationship, and we completely understand that. But if something happens to someone, it's, their word against yours and that whole situation. So we just encourage people to make sure that they have a written lease and include, a termination date or an extension clause and how that works. And then also including important things that's specific to farmland, like who pays for the soil test, how much fertilizer is required to be put on, and then is there any depreciation on any fertilizer or limestone or things like that. And there is a template available on University of Illinois website that's commonly used. As I said, no one wants to terminate a lease, but this is just kind of a PSA. If you do have to terminate a lease at any point in time, make sure that you terminate it in writing, because it's important to be in writing in order to be legal. So that's just kind of a little bit of an overview of leases. Now I'm going to talk about actually the value of professional farm management and what I do. So we, as professional farm managers, these are kind of the services that we provide to our clients. So we negotiate leases, whether it be a share lease or a cash rent lease. We negotiate those with the farmer on behalf of the landowner. We also do the lease analysis. So we're comparing all those lease types, going over that with the client and helping them understand what lease type might be best for them based on their goals and objectives. We provide quarterly and annual reports to them. And what this really does is it can provide a lot of transparency between multiple owners. We get a lot of situations where farms are owned by multiple people and they're not always seeing eye to eye. They don't always have the same goals. So us kind of being in between can help try to create transparency in the reporting process, and then also be kind of a voice of reason when they're on opposing sides. We can make a solid recommendation as a professional of what we recommend they do in a particular situation. We also find that we can create continuity between multiple generations. And this is where it seems that farmland owners are becoming more and more removed from the farm. So a person inherited a farm, and their parents, they used to go to the farm when they were a kid, But now this landowner lives in California or New York, and they really don't have that much connection to the farm or really understand what's going on the farm. And so what we find is that if we're able to work with that generation that did understand the farm, the likelihood of them, the likelihood of the next generation keeping it, if they are allowed to have reports and allowed to understand the asset before they actually, inherit it and it arrives on their lap and they say, I really don't understand anything about farming, then unfortunately sometimes they just say, well, let's just sell it because I don't understand it. Whereas if we have a farm manager involved, it's kind of like an asset, like a Edward Jones manager or someone like that. They're going to keep those because they're easy. Someone takes care of it for them. So we can kind of serve as in the same role of taking care of that for them so they don't go and just sell the farm. Capital improvement management. So we manage capital improvement projects like tile, building grain bins, and do analysis regarding that. We handle government programs like USDA, FSA, and look into any opportunities there. This is an example of a budget. We do yearly budgets for our farm clients. We find that's very important to kind of set them up for knowing what expenses we're going to have and what income they can expect throughout the entire year. Fertility monitoring. So we're collecting soil tests, analyzing those, and we're also collecting information like yield data and yield maps. Yield maps are a very powerful thing, especially if there's a farm that, say, needs some field tile. You can lay yield maps next to each other and see where the wet spots are. Those are very, very helpful in explaining to a landowner, this is why this farm needs some tile. And then also, after the tile is installed, it's very gratifying when you could actually see where the areas have improved. We also take drone footage of all the farms in the summer, and then we also purchase inputs and negotiate purchasing of inputs on behalf of our landowners and help them. We do sell their grain on their behalf. So the challenges that we see in land ownership currently are definitely transparency. Farms are being owned by more and more people in a partnership, maybe a brother and sister. They weren't planning, they wouldn't have chose each other as business partners, but now all of a sudden they are. And so transparency and having aligned goals we find is very important. And we find that we can assist in trying to work through some tough situations for them. Transition plan, like I said, as you're going from one generation to the next, having us involved as a farm manager and trying to set up, how it's handled for the next generation, working with CPAs and attorneys. That's something we do a lot with the estate planning side of things. Constantly, we're seeing changes in agriculture, like markets. Markets are obviously changing, technology. And then we see a lot on, solar, wind, CO2 pipeline. Those solicitations are coming in all the time. And I know that many landowners across the state are receiving these as well. And some of them, aren't educated enough or have not become educated enough in those topics to really know how to handle them and what to do with them. And the one thing I will say on the whole wind, solar, CO2 pipeline, this is just a plug. One thing I always tell people is that you need to make sure that you look at these documents, have an attorney review these documents, ask for what you want before ever signing any sort of solar, wind, CO2 pipeline document, and just make sure that you are having them properly reviewed by an attorney, and make sure that you fully understand what those documents say, because they typically are, 70 pages long and have a lot of legal language in them. So a little bit about land values. So we'll kind of switch gears into what we're seeing. So this is a chart of the 7th District farmland values from the Chicago Fed. And what we're seeing is a little bit of a downtick in farmland values. So October 1 of 23 to October 1 of 24. So year over year, they're saying that Illinois is down about one point. And then from July of 24 to October 1 of 24, down 5 points. For good farmland value. And I would say that, we've seen a little bit of the farmland values just kind of taper off compared to what they were in 2022 and 2023. The one thing I will say is that we are still, even though we might be trailing off just a little bit compared to where we were, we're still definitely above trend line. So above the trend line of the typical appreciation we've seen in farmland. So I would still say farmland prices are good. definitely across the Midwest. So this is just a question. I don't know if you guys have the capability of answering or not, but I had, what was the average PI point for we do like a Murray Wise Associates land review. Essentially, we are always collecting data and we figured why not share the data with others. So we have been sending out, it's kind of new, but we've been sending out a bi-monthly land review where we include farmland sales in across Illinois in different counties. And we send that out as a free publication for everyone, whoever wants to sign up for it. So on our last land review, the average PI, I'll just answer the average per PI point for Class B of farmland, which is 117 to 132, was actually 109 per PI point. And what per PI point is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a measurement tool that we kind of use for farmland. And it's essentially you take the dollar amount that the farmland sold for and divide it by the productivity index point. So for example, if it's 117 per PI point, it was so many dollars divided by 117 equals 109. So that was our average that we saw in this past round of data. So this is a QR code for the land review if you want to scan it and sign up for it on your computer. We have one for Illinois and one for Iowa. And like I said, it's a bi-monthly, it's a free bi-monthly data information that we can send to you if you're interested in that. So who are the buyers and what is the method that we see farmland is selling? So in recent times, the buyers that we have seen have been more farmers and what I call local investors. So what I deem as a local investor is essentially a local landowner who owns farmland in the area and is just looking to add to their portfolio. So we're seeing them purchasing sometimes via a 1031 exchange. And then we're also seeing farmers that are really purchasing farmland. We're not seeing a lot of action from any like larger investors. The numbers just don't work for them right now. So we're not really seeing them be players in the game. The way that we're hitting some of these still like really, really good farmland prices, there was a farm over in McDonough County. It was like 430 some acres. It averaged between 21,000 and like 24,000, which was really an outstanding sale. Not only this year, but also would have been an outstanding sale in prior years. And to hit some of those numbers, you really just have to have two neighbors that really, really want the farm. That's really the only way we're hitting some of those higher numbers that we saw in prior years. Or in a township that farmland really hasn't sold too much, and it's, a really high quality piece that everybody wants. I would say those are the factors that are driving the farmland values. What methods are farms selling? We're seeing definitely more of a shift towards listings versus auctions. And this is primarily because, seller expectations are pretty high right now because they saw the farmland values in 22 and 23. And so, sellers are wanting a really, really good price for their farmland. And sometimes their expectation is higher than what, we think the market will bear. And so some of those farms are turning to listings where they're sitting on the market. We're seeing them sit on the market for longer and then just basically see price reductions over time. Whereas in the years before, if a listing hit the market, it was basically, sold within a couple days because there was such a high demand and everybody wanted farmland. Now, I will say there's still definitely plenty of demand for farmland. I don't think that's anything that's going to really change. It's a law of scarcity. They're not making any more of it. The farmers are always going to want farmland. And local farmland buyers are also always going to be interested. So I sped through that pretty quick because I wanted to be respectful of your guys' time. So it looks like we do have some time for questions if anyone has any.
I guess I just have one have you guys seen a big shift towards flex leases, or is that still kind of a new concept, or what I guess are landowners looking at that as?
Yeah, so I know that there's been some data published in the land values book last year, and it was really showing a shift between what leases are showing, compared to last year. And we have seen a shift more to cash rent and flex leases compared to 50/50. And then even between cash rent and flex, we've seen more on the flex side of things. And I would say personally, I've seen the exact same thing. I think part of it is because there were some years that, you set the cash rent lease like a year in advance. So we're setting them now, or we've already set them, and we don't know what the markets are actually going to look like truly as we get into 25. And so I think that they're becoming more common because of that, because we really don't know what we're going to see. And I think there were some leases every single year. If you don't have a flex on a lease, every single year it's like someone's probably going to be a little high, or someone's going to be low. It's just kind of how it goes.
Would you say that it's more of the landowners that have been involved with farming or understand it enough to do the flex leases versus, maybe the investor types that are just kind of wanting to do a straight cash rent and looking for that like 3%, 4% return on the investment? And I'm just genuinely asking. If you don't know, that's okay too.
Yeah, no, I would say it's definitely more of the educated landowners that are doing this. If a landowner does not understand like farming, doesn't understand the markets, things like that, they're definitely hesitant to do a flex lease. Flex leases have there's so many different ways that you can structure them. And so in order for someone to, properly structure a flex lease, they really have to understand farming, understand, the whole picture in order to do that. And we see a lot of landowners, there's some that want to do it, but they just say, oh, it's just too complicated. Let's just do a flat rent. So we see that a lot with landowners that we, don't work with. Are there any other questions?
Excuse me, I'm an ag lender, and I know you talked a couple times in your presentation about land where there's more than one person that owns it together,
Mm-hmm.
and I hate that, just for the record. I think that's so hard and complicated when someone dies, or like let's say siblings own it, and then one of the spouses of the siblings die and somebody
Mm-hmm.
wants out. And I mean, do you run into that at all with complications? I guess I've had too many of those complications.
Yeah, so we see it all the time. I mean, we serve some days we're serving more as like we're kind of the in-between person. We've got clients right now that we work with that don't really care for each other. And that's why we're working with them. Is because they needed someone to kind of be the person to make recommendations to try to move things forward, because they don't exactly see eye to eye. So we get called in a lot of complicated situations with ownership of farmland, where maybe somebody wants to sell, somebody wants to keep it. We usually get pulled in a lot of complicated situations like that. And I would agree, if it's possible when people are setting up estate plans, if they have enough farmland to just split it equally among children, or however they want to handle that, it seems better than forcing someone to basically become a business partner with someone they didn't choose to become a business partner with. So yeah, lots of complex family situations that we've been in before.
I'm sure you have. It does get messy quick, and everybody thinks it's all great until somebody passes away, and then all of a sudden the shift happens and the commotion starts. So I'm a fan of dividing it prior to any transactions so that everybody has their own chunks. But that can, like you say, unless it's able to divide it up equally within a state, it's hard to
Mhm.
do that too. But
And it can be
just
very stressful when someone inherits a piece of farmland, especially with someone maybe, they didn't want to be partners with. And so in that case, They may end up selling it when really farmland is obviously a great asset to own, if they just, you know, understand that it is and owned it by themselves.
Yeah, and then to your point, there's people that end up with it that don't know anything about it that you mentioned earlier, and that certainly is complicated as well.
Definitely. All right. Any other questions? If not, I appreciate all of you jumping on today, and thank you very much for having me and for your time.
Well, we appreciate you doing it, and that was very informative. Thank you very much. And so now we have one more tool in our toolbox. If we need somebody needs help with something, we can send them your way.
Yeah, definitely. Feel free to reach out.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.